Welcome back to the channel, welcome to this week's video. I am currently in Villa La Angostura in the province of Neuquén, which means I am in northern Patagonia. Enjoy the video. Okay, so as promised, this Patagonia video is now here. It's a bit different to most of my other travel videos in that it's not a vlog. I decided I didn't want to vlog while I was traveling, so instead I took lots of photos and videos and will essentially explain what I did over the few days that I was traveling and hopefully overlay most or all of me talking with some photos and videos so you can see the fantastic scenery. So let's go and get into it. I managed to hire a car in Argentina. I had to get my dad to have an extension on his credit card and send it down to me. It was all very last minute, but we managed it in the end. And let's take day one as the day before I left. It was my last day of work, actually. I went to pick up the car in the evening from the center of Cordoba. They didn't have any snow chains, which is technically a requirement when you're traveling to the regions I was traveling in winter. So I sort of planned to pick them up once I got there. I had a very stressful drive home through the city, but I made it there all okay. It was fine in the end. Then I just sort of got ready, packed my things, made some food for the road. I actually made an enormous tub of rice pudding, which I proceeded to forget in the fridge the next day. And I also made myself some pasta with pesto, I think, which I also forgot in the fridge, which I was very annoyed about when I realised, but there we go. I then tried to get a fairly early night and was ready to get up very, very early the next morning for, I believe, about 13 hours of driving. So this long day of driving started very early. I woke up at 5:30 to leave at 6. I wanted to make sure I just got on the road as quickly as possible so that I wasn't arriving at my Airbnb too late. And I set off. Now, the day before when I picked up the car, I had asked them whether they had a phone mount so that I could follow Google Maps while I was traveling. They didn't. So on my way out of Cordoba, I stopped at literally every single petrol station I saw and tried to find one. I finally did. Wasn't great, but it did the job fine, was fairly cheap, stuck it on, and we were sorted. I then just got cracking. It was dark for about 2-3 hours while I was driving before the sun came out. But these roads were fairly easy, fairly fast, not complicated at all, in good condition. And so we got on well. Then every, I don't know, hour or so, there was a toll booth where I would stop, stretch my legs a bit, have something to eat, and then carry on. Now, I've been driving along very nice and relaxed for about 550 kilometers, and I'd sort of been doing my own fuel economy calculations because the car was kind of quite basic, so it didn't give me a predicted range. And unfortunately, I realized I wasn't going to make it to my chosen petrol station, which was quite problematic because I was in the middle of nowhere and I couldn't find any petrol stations. So, actually before this, I'd been getting very, very tired, but I very quickly perked up, full of adrenaline, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of petrol. It really did get very close. I stopped at another toll booth and I asked the lady whether she knew of any petrol station nearby. She directed me to her little village. And when I say little village, I reckon 400 people live there, maybe a little bit more. And the petrol station was not a hand pump one, but it almost felt like it was. It was very, very old. But the petrol was cheap. The further south you go in Argentina, generally, the cheaper the petrol gets. And I filled up sort of 7 litres or so just to make it to the next town to get some proper petrol. The lady at the toll booth had told me that the petrol in her little village was probably a bit dodgy. So I decided to only put a bit in and then carry on. At this point, I'd been driving for quite a while, so I had a probably half an hour lunch break, very relaxed, got myself a coffee. It was vile, but never mind. I then set off again, and up until this point, the weather had been a bit meh, cloudy, overcast, there wasn't much going on. The roads had been nice though, and it all switched around after this little town, and the roads got very potholy. Very, very potholy. But the sun came out and the scenery got slightly more interesting, so I was very happy. Now, I was making my way down to Neuquén, which is the capital of Neuquén province, and the closer I got there, as the sun set, almost the worse the roads got and the more busy they got. So by the time I was an hour out from Neuquén, I was so tired because it had been 12 hours of driving or so. Super tired, super stressed, and I just wanted to get to my Airbnb and crash, which I did finally, and all was well. On day 3, I woke up early again and got straight out on the road, very quickly out of the Airbnb. I had to drive on some unlit, unmarked, kind of ring roady type roads for a while in the dark, which was really sketchy, but made it through. And then as I started to leave Neuquén and headed towards the Rio Negro province, the sun started to come up behind me, these beautiful fast mountain roads, and it was stunning. It was really lovely. Then once the sun came up and I sort of got further towards where I needed to go, I started seeing snowy peaks, big rivers, big lakes, and it was stunning. As I got, again, closer to Bariloche, the scenery, it was like a mixture of Swiss lakes and mountains, but also deserts as well, and it was just really cool. I was stopping to take pictures, and I just had a very nice drive that day, despite being quite tired. Now, as I went into Bariloche, I went to pick up some snow chains, which I had planned to do, and I also just had a nice little walk around, had some lunch. The weather was fairly nice, which was good, but Bariloche wasn't really my favourite place on the planet, I would say. It was very busy, very touristy, and the town itself is not that pretty. Obviously, it's right by a massive lake, which is stunning with snowy mountains all around it because I went in winter. So I can't really complain, but it wasn't my favourite stop-off point, let's put it that way. I then carried on south along Ruta 40, which is the big national road that goes from the northern tip of Argentina all the way to the south, parallel to the Andes, towards El Bolson. Amazing. The views got even better. Lakes for days, mountains. The road was smooth for the most part, and I just had a fantastic drive. I got stopped by the police for the first time. It's quite standard there to check my documents. Everything went smoothly, and I made it to El Bolson in good time. Lovely Airbnb, went to sleep, ready for the next day. The next day is where I felt my holiday had really started. I woke up nice and relaxed, did a bit of research, decided where I was going to go for my walk, and I decided to go up the Cerro Pil Triquitron, which is a mountain just on the east side of El Bolson. Now, I drove up the road, the access road, and as I sort of got out of the village, the road, a dirt road, stopped being a dirt road and started being a snow road. So I decided, do you know what? I'm going to park down here. And in the end, I decided to walk up, which was very long. But, you know, I did actually want to go for a long walk that day, so I didn't really have a problem. It was very dark and very cloudy that morning. The weather was quite bad and it did snow a couple of times, very lightly. But I was walking up, it was pretty chilly, but obviously walking, I warmed up. And as I got towards the top, I then reached the car park where I had wanted to stop. And I started walking up the footpath towards the, I don't know how you would call it in English. In Spanish, it's would it be a refugio? Yeah. It's kind of like a hut in the mountains where there's a experienced mountaineer. So in the summer, if you've got loads of people going for walks, he can help them or whatever. But also they tend to have food and drinks and things like that. Halfway up this footpath, which was so steep and covered in snow, it was really tough going. I won't lie to you. I'm fairly fit, but that was hard. There's what was called a bosque tallado, which is like a carved forest, and it's just lots of little statues around that have been carved. It was really creepy because, again, here I was still in the cloud, and it was a bit eerie, I'll be honest. No one around at all. No one. Absolutely no one. So it was a bit weird. As I started climbing up out of the bosque tallado towards the refugio, I realized I was going to get above the clouds, and that gave me energy. I started going up nice and quickly, and I got to the top, and it was not to the top of the mountain, to the top of this little climb where the refugio was, and it was just stunning. I just had a layer of cloud with the mountains on the other side of the valley just out there in front of me. So quiet, snow everywhere, super deep, stunning. It was me, and as I went into the refugio, There were 2 cats and the what's his name? Rifugiero, something like that. I think that's how you say it. Kind of the guy who was there for 3 or 4 days looking after the place. I also later did see some ice climbers up on a mountainside, but that was it pretty much, and it was so beautiful. I very quickly realised that I was not going to be able to make it to the top of the Cerro Piltriquitron as I had planned. There was far too much snow. I would have needed snowshoes, and it would have still taken me a really long time, I think. And that evening I had to drive back to Bariloche. So I decided to go up to a viewpoint, which was already enough. Very hard work, trying not to sink into the snow too much, but it was just so stunning. The weather was fantastic, the views were amazing, and I had a bit of a snack at the top there before sort of semi-slipping, falling, rolling, stumbling back down the mountain to the refugio, where I had a hot chocolate, had a lovely chat with the man, and then walked back down, which was quite sad because I had really enjoyed that sort of little moment at the top where it was just me by myself in this beautiful landscape. But back down, back in the car, drove back to Bariloche, did get stopped by the police again to check my documents, but all good, and I made it to the Airbnb for the night. On day 5, I went on a big boat trip through the Lago Nahuel to Puerto Blest. It's a port that you can only reach by boat, and it's part of the Cruce Andino, which used to be an old trade route from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And to cross the Andes through Patagonia, it would go sort of whatever was being traded would be taken in a truck, then it would cross a lake in a boat, then there would be a truck to another lake, and another boat, and another truck, and another lake. And all sort of the truck sections between these lakes were the only roads there. There was sort of nothing linking anything there. So the trucks had been brought there by boat, and that was how it set up. Once the Panama Canal was opened, this sort of crossing stopped being commercially viable. And so a Swiss person, I believe, turned it into a tourist attraction, basically. So I did a couple of legs of this trip. It was really cold. The weather was bad. It was not raining, sorry. It was snowing and there was wind. So I did get quite chilly that day. I had some borrowed ski gear, but it was still cold. Again, though, the natural beauty of this place was fascinating. Part of this excursion included a very treacherous walk to a waterfall called La Cascada de los Cántaros, and this walk was along wooden walkways that had not been gritted and were covered in sheet ice, which was very sketchy. But I got to see the waterfall, I made it back, slept on the boat ride home, and then drove out of Bariloche to Villa Langostura. Now, the drive out of Bariloche was horrible. There was loads of traffic, another reason I wasn't a fan of Bariloche. I got stopped by the police to have an alcohol test. I was breathalyzed, which was a first for me and very good fun. I then drove along the Ruta 40 again to Villa Langostura. It's part of the Ruta de los Siete Lagos, which is a sort of panoramic route that lots of people do. Unfortunately, it was dark, but there we go. I had to get there, and once I did get there, I met some lovely people who I watched the Copa America quarter semi-final with. Argentina won, so we were very happy, and then I slept fantastically. The next morning in Villa Langostura, I had a fantastic breakfast and then set out to visit La Peninsula de Quetriwe, which is a peninsula that sticks out into the Lago Nahuel, which is where I'd been on a boat trip the day before. Today, I took a boat trip to the tip of this peninsula where we had a look round at some really lovely trees. Can't remember what they're called. They have a cinnamon-coloured bark. They're not useful for building. They're not useful for anything other than looking pretty, basically. So, very interesting, but I can't remember the name. Anyway, from then I walked the 12 kilometres back to the car. Stunning. Honestly, possibly the best time on the trip. I really loved it. It was so tranquil. There was no one around. You could see through the trees, the lake with the mountains behind again. And I just had a lovely time. I really enjoyed it. When I made it back to the car, I went to have a lovely apple and rosehip tea. I think that's what it was. And a massive slice of cake, which went down very, very well. Before I then carried on a little bit along the Ruta de los Siete Lagos, stopping every now and then to take photos. Again, just throughout all of this, the scenery was amazing. I then turned off onto 25 kilometers of terrible, terrible, terrible dirt road. There was ice, there was mud, I was slipping and sliding everywhere. It was sketchy, you know, in a little hatchback. It's not what you want to be doing, but I made it to Villa Traful, which is alongside El Lago Traful, which is actually not one of the 7 lakes of this Ruta de los Siete Lagos, but is still a really stunning place. I went up to my cabin, took a photo of the lovely starry sky, and went to bed. The only thing was in Villa Traful is that there was no electricity at that time when I arrived because they'd had a power cut all day. Still just about managed to cook some food on the hob and managed without Wi-Fi or phone signal. In lots of these little places, there is little to no phone signal, and you're lucky if you have any mobile data at all. So at times it was a little bit, but I made it there and it was all good. On day 7, I had a lovely walk up Ser Negro, which overlooked Villa Traful and Lago Traful. So this was another beautiful, beautiful day, another beautiful, beautiful walk up the mountain. I was joined by a stray dog. She was lovely. She was a bit crazy, but was just running up the path ahead of me. Crazy dog. Crazy dog. Yes, let's eat some snow. You ready? You ready? Let's go. Let's go. I didn't make it all the way to the top. I had seen snowshoe prints and ski tracks coming down. So that gives you an idea of the correct kit that should have been used for this trek. But I did make it up a fair way. Again, joined by the dog. We played a bit with snowballs and had a bit of fun at the top. You are a crazy dog. Huh? Huh? Who's a crazy dog? Who's a crazy dog? Ready? I fell over several times walking down, I have to say. And every time I did, the dog sort of came back to check on me, made sure I was okay, and then we carried on. So that was nice. I then had a lovely lunch on a pier overlooking the lake. The sun was fantastic. Read my book for a solid while. And then I headed to a cafe for some hot chocolate and cake, which again was fantastic and very much needed. I then went along the slippery, muddy road back to Ruta de los Siete Lagos. I went up a little bit north and then turned off onto another dirt road to Villa La Melinquina, which is another tiny town on the side of a lake. Stunning. Again, went to a cabin where the only heating was from a log burner, which took 3 attempts to light. Once I had lit it, the bedroom, which was above, did get quite toasty, but I still had to bring extra 2 blankets from the car. And in the morning, it was disgusting because obviously the log burner hadn't been on for a while, and the temperatures at night was between -5 and probably -10. So it was just very hard to get out of bed, I will be honest. On my final day in Patagonia, very sad, I went for another walk up a mountain called Cerro Ventana. Again, did not make it anywhere near the top. Snowshoes were required. Saw the tracks of them again. Had to cross a river. Was quite sketchy, I have to say, along a log that was looking a bit dodge, but I managed. And then I walked back down, had some lunch by the side of the lake, and drove up again Ruta 40, Ruta de los Siete Lagos, to San Martín de los Andes, which is sort of the northernmost tip of that route. From there, while I was there, I handed in the chains. I was lucky that I managed to hand them in a different place where I picked them up. I'm very happy I managed to do that. Had a bit of a break and then drove up a really stunning stretch of the Ruta 40 to Zapala, I think it was called, where I had an Airbnb booked ready for my long drive home. I didn't drive all the way back from there. I stopped in one other place before getting home. But yeah, that was the end sort of my little road trip around the lakes of Patagonia, of northern Patagonia. And I had a really fantastic time in terms of sort of accommodation. You might have gathered that I was using Airbnb a bit. I used Google a bit. I used sort of people who knew people I'd stayed with, which was quite sketchy sometimes. Not sketchy, it was just slightly worrying sometimes when I didn't have phone signal. I was turning up to a new village, had no clue who I was looking for, who I was going to find, and whether I would be able to make it or not. But overall, a really great experience. And honestly, I'm so happy I managed to take a car there and enjoy it to the fullest. Did loads of walking, and it was just a great time. If you ever go to Argentina, it's another place to go, I have to say. So that is the end of this week's video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, stick them in the comments below and I will get back to you. And subscribe if you haven't already. Stay tuned.